All right, so now let's bring in ABC News contributor, retired Colonel Steve Ganyard. Colonel, thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Phil.
All right, as we discussed with Congressman Katko, you may have just heard, the U.S. and our NATO allies have been training Afghan forces for years, and yet they were overrun, as we saw, in a matter of weeks. What does that say to you about the success of the U.S. mission there? And was this inevitable no matter when the U.S. left?
Yeah, it says that we failed and the Afghan people have failed and the people that we allied ourselves with failed and the Taliban won. They are in the process of winning and it looks inevitable like they will win. Phil, think about why we got into Afghanistan. And it was after 9/11 because the Taliban had enabled the al-Qaeda and bin Laden to train and to plan the 9/11 attacks. So they created a sanctuary. So we went in there going after terrorists, and we decided to stay, despite the lessons that we supposedly learned in Vietnam, to build a country and build a country in our own image. Problem was that we were in the midst of a civil war and that we essentially ended up picking the wrong side. We allied ourselves with warlords and people that were only marginally better than the Taliban. And after more than 2,000 American dead and more than $2 trillion spent, we are leaving in a rather ignominious way.
Colonel, just last month, President Biden said it was unlikely that the Taliban would overrun the entire country. The question is, and it's an obvious one, did the administration overestimate the ability of the Afghan military and government to hold back the Taliban?
I think what they were expressing, Phil, was a hope. You would think after that much time, after that much money spent, that they would do a better job of standing up to the Taliban. But it's one of these a situation where money cannot buy you commitment. We cannot want it more than they want it. So I think the administration, if you had asked anybody behind closed doors, if you had a beer in your hand, any of them, to include any of the military officers that have worked Afghanistan for years, would have told you that the day we leave, or the day that we signal we're leaving, is the day that the current government in Kabul begins to fall.
So we were thinking about this today. Maybe you can talk to me tactically about this. The Taliban said to be 50 miles from Kabul right now. What happens if they move into the capital and U.S. troops and personnel are still there? Is the Taliban waiting for the U.S. to leave, or could we actually see an armed conflict here?
We could. That is the danger. So we have been negotiating an exit in Qatar. Ambassador Khalilzad has been negotiating nothing really, because he said, we're leaving. Please don't shoot at us on the way out. And there are reports today that said, please spare the embassy. So it's rather disheartening is probably the nicest thing you can say. But in this case, as the Taliban begins to circle Kabul, which they will, it's going to be up to what's left of the Afghan army to defend the capital. Now, if the Taliban owns the rest of the country, it's going to be quite hard for the current leadership of the Afghan government to survive, and for the rest of the city to hold on. And so there may be a siege, but you got to understand this is not like it's not like the siege of Stalingrad, where you have armies in uniform and tanks and artillery. The Taliban are insurgents, and it is a civil war, and they look very much like the people that they're fighting or the people that they hope to rule. And so it's not like you can send bombers or AC-130s in there and shoot people up, without killing innocent people as well. So it's very, very difficult. They'll be able to infiltrate. They'll be able to sabotage, to create bombings. It's going to be very difficult. To your point, what we're doing here is trying to send in enough U.S. troops to be able to evacuate every U.S. citizen, service member, and diplomat without the embassy being overrun. Remember that there's long memory here of Benghazi, and there's an even longer memory of what happened in the Tehran embassy. And the last thing the Biden administration wants to see is the U.S. embassy burning and U.S. hostages or dead because they failed to protect them as the rest of the country was collapsing.
Right. And still, this is so tough to watch for young women and girls over there in Afghanistan right now. U.S. officials have said for years that the war in Afghanistan can only be resolved through a negotiated settlement, and that it can't be won militarily, as we're seeing now. What have been the obstacles to reaching that kind of settlement with the Taliban? And do you think they were ever negotiating in good faith?
Excuse me. These are people who execute women in public, who institute Sharia law, who take this country back to the Middle Ages, and that is their intent. And negotiating in good faith is not a concept that they understand. So I think we need to understand that once the U.S. signaled we're leaving, the negotiations that were undertaken in Qatar were basically how do we create some political top cover as we get out of Afghanistan. Again, I'm not passing judgment whether it's a good idea or a bad idea to leave, but once we go into a negotiation and say, here's all our cards on the table, then we really aren't negotiating anything at all. And the only way that the Taliban has been willing to negotiate is at the point of a gun. And if we're not willing to stick around, then the Taliban is eventually going to overrun and retake this country.
Yeah, and it seems sooner than later. Colonel Steve Ganyard, thanks so much for your time and expertise tonight. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Phil.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.